I guess one of the drawbacks of ending the first episode of The Sympathizer on a real Hollywood cliffhanger is that it sets a tone that you can't keep up for the run of the series. Not that you would want to, or not that that's the kind of story this is, but it does make for an inevitable transition. The captain has one of those in front of him too, but considering he's already studied in America, he's somewhat better equipped than the general, and definitely in a better spot than the civilians who lost family members to the war before being uprooted. The commandant who reads the current draft of his confession can't hide his contempt for American culture when he says the word Hollywood. I suppose you can't blame him. Like the pop music in the first episode, it can all be somewhat infectious, as we see in the opening sequence, which jumps back and forth between his first days in the States and the conclusion of their escape from Saigon. There's a sense of reprieve as he drives down the open road smoking cigarettes and listening to the radio, contrasted by the brutally drawn-out sprint as Bond refuses to leave his wife's dead body behind. This is not something he'll soon forget, and when the top goes down to reveal him sleeping in the back seat, that ties these two scenes together better than the great edits that make it feel seamless. His blood brother will spend most of this episode in a nearly catatonic state, and it's not hard to understand why when the camera lingers on his son's foot for the absolute minimum amount of time necessary for that word to make sense. When they get to California, it becomes a different kind of show, while Robert Downey Jr. becomes a totally different character. There is a brief stint in Arkansas at a refugee camp purgatory where the seed of the general's paranoia is planted. We'll see that develop as things unfold, but the captain reaches out to his old professor, who's able to get him out of Fort Chaffee and away from the general for the time being. Of course, the problem is that there is a spy, and it's the captain, and we get some insights into how he communicates with Mon back in Vietnam by sending coded messages in invisible ink to his aunt in Paris. If Robert Downey Jr. was borderline over the top in the previous episode as the CIA operative Claude, then I'm not sure how to classify his Professor Hammer character. It's almost as if a genuine performance has been replaced by a walking stereotype aggregator. There are quite a few examples of racism that the captain experiences, with the professor being the fetishistic type, as opposed to the overt type from the shop owner who clarified they only had cornstarch because this is America, not Japan. But it does stand out how well the captain navigates this when it's in his interest to. The professor's secretary, Sophia, points this out after he delivers the list of his Oriental and Occidental traits for the group of non-Asian academics to marvel at. It's a lot. His dismay at the Oriental Studies department being folded into Asian American Studies, his slipping into a kimono, and the way that he decorates his office, his comment that half-breeds are the future, and the one that still manages to top them all, comparing himself to an egg because he's white on the outside and yellow on the inside. The captain responds more genuinely when a student journalist asks if he felt the support of the Americans who were marching against the war. When he presses about who they were supporting, he answers the Vietnamese people without seeing any inherent contradictions. I say the captain responds more genuinely here because this is all through the filter of being a spy acting in support of the South. Half of what he does, including calling the book he uses to encode his messages racist garbage when he sees a copy in Hammer's office. It can be a little confusing and even frustrating at times, never knowing how the captain really feels about anything. And in this episode, we didn't get what I like so much about the first one, those periodic looks into what he was actually thinking. We get a little bit of it through the filter of his letters back to Mon, and we get a little bit of it whenever he starts his relationship with Sophia, but I'm wondering if they just used that first episode to set things up so that we could get to know him. The relationship is one of the highlights of this second installment. Sandra Oh's character being able to see through the captain's facade is a welcome addition, even if it only goes so far. And the squid scene that kicks things off is funny on its own, but having her be the one he delivers the story to helps to pull it off. There's a connection and a spark there, and it's enough to get them in bed together. This is something the commandant reading his confession has trouble seeing as part of his mission. And it's one of the few times where we see that part of the story bleed through, but the look on the captain's face when he thinks about it is a pretty good rebuttal. The general and his wife finally get settled in California, and when the captain goes to visit, he arrives at the same time as the major, who picks up the nickname the Dumpling. This encounter mostly serves to show how the general's paranoia hasn't gone away, but the captain also notices the Dumpling has access to a peanut candy from home that will turn out to be important later. The general appears to be doing a lot of drinking, and he ends up pulling a gun on the captain to drive home just how important finding the spy is, and just how unhinged he's getting. Bon also appears to be doing quite a bit of drinking, while paying tribute to his lost family, and shows his distaste for the affair with Ms. Mori by turning their picture around when he notices the sucker bite on the captain's neck. He does finally get out of the house, though, to help the general, who is opening a liquor store. A racist graffiti incident there continues to add to the general's paranoia. On opening day, there's another scene where we get to see the captain be mostly genuine when he runs into a reporter who he knows from school, who goes by the name Sonny now. Again, it's mostly genuine because he has to pretend his side lost the war when we expect that his views would align with Sonny, who is supportive of the new government. Things take a turn when the general speaks to the crowd. He uses the graffiti incident to cast suspicion that someone in this tight-knit group is a spy. They get fired up and start to chant "slit the mole's throat," while the mole, who is looking fairly uneasy at this point, has to join in. After Claude arrives and they interrogate everyone, the captain decides to use the peanut candy as a way to implicate Major Wan. He makes the accusation as an act of self-preservation, and it may have gone nowhere, but when the general looks into it, he gets word that the Dumpling's family is doing well in Vietnam, while everyone else's has been imprisoned. He writes a letter asking Mon if he should go through with the killing. To this point, we don't know that his job as a spy has ever involved anything like this. We've seen some flashes of an interrogation he was conducting and multiple references to hard-boiled eggs, which he doesn't like. In this episode, they came up with the student reporter asking if he killed anyone in the war. So there's probably something there, but in this case, he knows he'd be killing someone innocent of the claims he made to protect himself. And if this wasn't bad enough, after he pens the invisible ink letter, he confronts Bon, who doesn't want to eat or shower. When he starts to hit his head in front of the shrine that holds his family's picture, we see a heavy flashback where he does the same thing in time with nails being pounded into his wife's coffin at the airfield after they landed. As they ride down the road together, the captain tells him about the mole, and Bon immediately comes around saying he can help with that. So this episode, which I didn't find as engaging as the first one overall, ends in a very similar fashion. The fall of Saigon marked an end and left us in a place where we could be certain that things would never be the same. If the captain does follow through with the general's wishes and brings Bon into it with him, I don't think this would turn out any different. And that's where the episode ends. And I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.